I love dragons and death, 'cause they are fun.
Welcome to Tory Survives Game of Thrones. This is currently episode 22. We're going through a comedic abridgment and blind reading of the Song of Ice and Fire book series by George R.R. Martin. Currently, we're on the first book, Game of Thrones, and we're on chapter 22, which is titled Arya 2. Now, to bring you up to speed a little bit, Arya is not having a good time. The last we saw, Arya's wolf attacked Joffrey. She ran away. They dragged her into the court. They killed her sister's wolf because they couldn't find Arya's wolf. And at the end of that chapter, the Hound had found her friend Micah, who she was asking to train in swordplay, murdered. Actually, the Hound had killed him. So she's been brooding the entire trip to King's Landing and currently has gone a little bit emo, a little more punk rock and stuff. I don't have a wig for her, but I did find this handy dandy bad dog hat. I thought it was a little ironic. So without further ado, she's in the small hall, and it's important to note this is the first time she's had to eat with the men. Normally they've been eating in the solar, like just her dad and Sansa, but she's having a time. At current, she just hates everything and everyone, and she's missing her old life. She's missing her family. She's missing Micah, her friend. So she's sitting there. They already started, and they finished the first course, which is some kind of sweet pumpkin soup. And that's when her dad walks in, Ned, who's the newly appointed Hand of the King. And the first thing Ned says, he looks just rough, and Arya thinks oh, he's back from fighting with the council. So I guess he's having a time too. And he's like, oh, good, you guys started without me. At least somebody in this place has sense. And he goes to sit down. Meanwhile, Arya's just kind of minding her business. And they're like, oh, crap, the hand's here. Let's get the food out. And they start bringing out these plates of ribs. And as soon as Ned sits down, Jory is sitting there. And he's like, so the talk in the yard is we need an attorney, because the small hall seats about 200, but Ned only has about 50 men with him in his state. And he's like, then knights will come clamoring, because I guess he's talking about filling some of the seats. Now, Jory and the other men they seem to be in good spirits, and I think part of it is they all got blinged out. They have new cloaks and stuff, and they have the hand on it, and they're in the stark colors, and they're gray and white. and Ned's just oh yeah, the attorney, great. I get to pretend to be honored and stuff, and it's for my sake. Because when Ned met with the council, basically Bobby just spends and he doesn't listen to anybody. And Ned doesn't want this. It's too expensive. It's a whole thing, but he's just playing good boy. Because we also know there's a plot to find if Cersei killed Jon Arryn, which he's pretty sure is going down. He thinks Cersei, or the Lannisters tried to kill Bran in general. They're looking into it. So he's just done. I don't know, poor Ned. He's sitting there, and as soon as Sansa hears the word attorney, she's like, oh, attorney? Oh my gosh. Just full on, girly girl. And Ned's like, don't worry, I have to put up with this. I'm not subjecting my daughters to it. And Sansa's like, oh, please, 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 please. You know, like, just, she wants to go to this tourney and be all fancy and hang out and whatnot. And, you know, Ned's kind of snarking, and Septa Mordain is like, well, you know, the princess is going to be at the tournament, and it's in your honor. If your family doesn't show up, it's gonna look kind of weird. And Ned's just like, oh, okay, fine, you can go to the tourney, both of you. And he like purposely, you know, includes Arya, because Arya and Sansa, especially now after this little rift, like, Sansa's barely talking to her, and her little Gretchen Wiener's Jane pull, you know, who's Van's daughter, is like just telling her all these lies and making stuff worse, and they're Mean Girl squad, and basically, and Arya is like, I don't even want to go, you know. And like the unspoken part of that is she knows Joffrey's gonna be there, and after that whole thing, she hates Joffrey. Like, she hates him. And you know, Ned's basically like, well, you're going, so I don't know what to tell you. You know what I mean? And Sansa's like, well, it'll be a great affair, you won't be missed, you know, like being whatever to Arya again. And Ned's just like, can y'all get along for like 5 seconds? You know, like, he's just done. And then he like at this point, because I guess he just wanted to grab a bite to eat, and as soon as he sits down, Jory threw him under the bus, and his girls are fighting. So he like looks at his ribs, and he's like, my appetite's gone. And he just kind of gets up and leaves, you know. And as soon as he does, everybody starts talking. Like, the guys all start talking. Like, Hullen starts mentioning a tournament and whatnot. And he's like, well, you know, your war horse isn't gonna, because apparently Hullen just talks about horses nonstop, and all the other guys are like, oh, here we go. And like a couple of people start shouting him down. Someone else is like, can we get some drinks over here, you know, just trying to shut it down. Meanwhile, you know, Sansa and Jenny Poole, they're doing that Mean Girl thing where they're like, and no one is talking to Arya. She's just kind of sitting there staring at her food, and that's when like the real emo-ness, you know, kicks in. She's, I'm just a kid in life, it's a nightmare, you know, like, because she starts thinking about like all her brothers and how much she misses them, because she's a tomboy. So she's like, I miss Rob, I miss playing with Rickon. And in like a really sweet kind of thing, because, you know, John did the same thing at the Blackwatch. It's the same two things too. She's like, I just wish John was here to mess up my hair and we could finish some sentences together, like just like John was missing her. And then, you know, she starts thinking about Winterfell, and like, see, I guess Ned had this policy where whenever he'd eat, there was always an extra seat at his like main dining table, and he would rotate people in. And like, he even told Rob, he's like, you have to know your men, and you have to let your men know you. You know, like, you can't ask men who don't know you to die for a stranger. So, you know, anybody who was in the realm, like old Nan with her crazy stories, Micken would show up and start talking about blacksmithing. Van would show up, start talking about like coin and stuff. You know, just anybody who was around, like one of them would be at the table. And Arya really used to like just listening to him go on about the happenings and whatnot. And then, you know, she also liked listening to the free riders and the rougher guys, you know. And she'd just be a little hellfire, like run around, help steal pies and naming babies, playing with people's kids, all sorts of stuff. Like, she had run of the place. So she deeply misses that. And then, like, on top of that, you know, she starts, like, she realizes, like, how much she hates all the men now, because she feels like they failed her as far as, like, you know, Micah getting killed and Lady getting killed and stuff. She's like, all these brave people talking all this big stuff, and nobody lifted a sword, nobody stopped the hound, nobody did nothing. So, like, all the stuff she used to like the chatter and stuff, she hates it. She's like, I hate them, I hate Sansa, you know, I hate my life. And she starts thinking about Micah, and she feels like she's about to cry, and she's like, I'm not crying in front of these fools and stuff. So she stands up, and she's like, I'm not hungry. And Septa's like, what the hell do you think you're doing? You know, because Septa's just doing her best to try to make a lady out of Arya, and Arya's not having it. And she's like, may I be excused? You know? And Septa's like, no, you barely touched your food. You can't be excused. And you're like, you gotta sit down and finish your plate, or clean your plate. And she's like, clean it yourself. And just, because I guess that's the limit. So she just takes off, and she's running, right? And it's important to know, I missed, like, a cute little anecdote, but, you know, she was always underfoot, to the point where this guy, Fat Tom, who she's about to encounter, always called her Arya Underfoot, because she was always underfoot. But currently, Fat Tom came with them, and he's guarding the tower with the bed chambers and stuff. So he's just sitting there and he sees her running, boy, and he sees, like, Septa yelling at her and stuff, and he's just like, whoa, what's going on, Arya? And she's just like, boom, right through his legs, you know, and he's like, oh. And she's like running up the stairs, because she's heading to her room, which is like the one place in the kingdom she still likes, you know. So you got, like, so you got Fat Tom just, like, trying to get up these steps after her, and Arya's just like, you know, because her favorite, like, most favorite thing about her room is she has this giant hardwood door with this giant, you know, like, securing bar, so she can slam it, lock it, and nobody's getting in there. Like, they need a battering ram. So she gets to her room, she slams the door, she throws the thing down, you know, and she's just like, nah, and sure enough, Fat Tom, like, after a second, he's up there, and he's, like, knocking on the door, and he's like, hey, you okay? Arya, you in there? And Arya is just like, no, you know? And she says, like, Fat Tom was always easy to trick. And maybe he is that stupid, but I think Fat Tom was standing at the door, and he was just like, yeah, I'm gonna just go. You know what I mean? Like, because she's 9, she's throwing a fit. Like, what's Fat Tom gonna do, really? So Arya is sitting there, and she starts digging through her chest and stuff that she had to pack. And finally she gets to the bottom of it, and she pulls out Needle, the little Bravo sword that John got her. So she's like, I got my needle. This is a paid actor, the lightsaber and stuff. I know it's a union thing. It's a union thing. Couldn't grab a real sword. But anyway, so she's sitting there, and she's thinking to herself, and she's like gesturing with Needle and stuff. And sure enough, before that, another knocks on the door, and it's Septa Mordan. And she's like, Arya, you come out there right now. And Arya is standing back. She's like, I dare you to come in here. Not that Septa can get through the door or whatever, but she's like, And Septa's like, you come out here. And she's like, I'll never come out here. You're not my dad. You know, like, basically. And she's like, I'm telling the hand. And runs down. And she's like, oh, I hate that lady. You know? And then, like, she starts walking over to the door. And she's like, crying and stuff. And she's looking out the window. And she's just like, she misses everything. She's like, I wish I could climb like Bran and stuff. I would climb right down this tower. And I would go and I would get a horse. And I would ride that horse into the woods. And I'd find my wolf. And then I'd go to Winterfell. And I just live there with Rob and Bran. And Rick, and, you know. And like, she's having a real moment, and she's just like, I hate everyone, you know? And it's fair. Like, she's feeling isolated. The one person who's supposed to be relating to her is completely ignoring her. That's Sansa, you know? So like, she's having a moment that only, you know, like young kids can have. And then there's a knock. And it's Ned, and he's not angry, you know, it's her dad. He's just like, hey, can you let me in? And she walks over and she does the you know, securing bar on the door. And Ned's standing there, and he doesn't even look mad. He just looks like sad and tired, you know? And he walks in and he's like, why do you have a sword? You know, like, at this point, he's just defeated. He's like, give me that sword. And she hands it over, and Ned's sitting there, and he's like, this is Mickens, Mark. And then he's standing there, and he's like, my 9-year-old daughter is getting armed out of my forge. And I don't even know, like, I don't even know about it. Like, how did you get this sword? And Arya, being like a true G, just goes blank. She just like, snitches get stitches, Dad. You know, like, straight up. She ain't having it. I guess she won't betray Jon for anything. Like, not even her dad. She's just like, you could whip me, whatever. Like, it ain't coming out. And he's like, I guess it doesn't matter. I guess it doesn't matter. But, like, what do you think the Septa's gonna say, knowing that you're playing with swords? And she's like, I hate Septa, you know? And he's like, she's trying to make you a woman, and you are making it the hardest thing possible. And she's like, I don't want to be a lady. You know? So Ed's just like, oh, you know, I should break this sword over my knee right now and just end this. And Arya kind of false pride, like, she's kind of bluffing. Like, it says in her voice, she's not sure if she believes it, but she's like, needle wouldn't break, you know? And he's like, oh, it has a name, huh? And that's when she's like, who gave you the sword, you know? But he's like, look, you got the wolf blood in you. That's what my dad used to say. You got the same as my brother and my sister. They both had it. And you got it. Like, it led them to a real early death, you know? Like, you remind me so much of Lyanna. You look like her. I'm sure she would have had a sword, you know, if my dad had let her and stuff. And he's like, but why are you, like, playing with the sword? And she's like, I'm not trying to play with it. And he's like, what do you know about sword play? And that's where Jon's first lesson kind of pays off, because she's like, you stick them with the pointy end. Because if you remember, when Jon gave her the sword, he's like, first lesson, stick them with the pointy end. You know? And that actually makes Ned laugh a little bit. He's like, all right, fair enough. And after that, she's like, I was trying to learn how to use the sword. Like, that's why me and Micah were in the woods. I asked him to try to train me. So all of this is my fault, because that's what, like, Sansa and Jane have been blaming Arya constantly. Like, it's your fault. Like, you're the reason all this happened. And you know, Arya's like kind of internalizing that, and she's taking all the guilt onto herself, and she's like, you know, so Micah got killed and stuff, and Jane Poole, let me tell you, Jane Poole needs to get checked, right? Because Jane Poole actually told her, she's like, yeah, the Hound cut him up in so many pieces. Originally, they thought it was a pig. They didn't even know it was a boy. And, like, starts lying to her to make it even worse and make her feel even worse. You know, like, because Jane Poole just needs to, I don't even know. Like, Jane Poole needs to, like, not die, but, like, choke on a scone and rethink her life. Like, almost die for a second. I don't know. Anyway. Like, that's so evil, right? She's such a bully. I hate bullies. Anyway, she's like, it's my fault. You know, like, he died. It's my fault. Lady got killed. That's my fault. And, like, all of this is my fault. Like, Nymeria being gone, that's my fault. And Ned, like, he just hugs his daughter. He's like, look, it's not. Okay? Like Micah's death was the fault of, you know, the Hound and his cruel master. You know, you can't put that on yourself. And, you know, she's like, I hate the Hound. I hate the Queen. I hate the King. I hate Joffrey. I hate Septim Mordain. And I hate Sansa, because Sansa is a dirty freaking liar. And the only reason she lied was so Joffrey would like her. And you know, Ned cuts her off. He's like, everybody lies a little bit, you know? And she, like, looks, and he's like, you don't think I really believe Nymeria just ran away, right? Like, you don't think I believe she randomly stopped following you around? And Arya kind of goes wide-eyed, like, you know, because she's kind of busted. And she's like, Jory promised me he wouldn't say anything. And Ned's like, Jory didn't say anything. I'm just not stupid, you know? And then she just goes into that too. She's like, we went out to the woods and we heard other wolves so she'd have people to play with. And Jory said there was game in there so she could eat. And she wouldn't stop following me, so we had to throw rocks. And I'm going to skip over it. Like, she goes into detail about having to throw rocks and her looking confused, and it was hard. But, yeah, she had to pelt her with rocks till she, like, left and stuff. And she's just like, oh, you know. And Ned's just kind of like, okay, look, I got to explain some things to you. You know, because I guess they kind of got a rapport, so he's sitting there, he's just kind of playing with her sword, and he sits, like, in the window, and he's like, you know what our saying is, right? And she's like, yeah, the winter is coming. And he's like, okay, and winter definitely is coming. Like, this is not a safe place. You know, we have enemies here. It's not like Winterfell. And he's like, you know, and you know, we're dire wolves, like that's our on our coat, you know. And she's like, yeah. And he's like, what you need to know is, like, during the summer things can happen. You were born in the long summer, so you don't really know. But you know, once winter comes, like, lone wolves die, but the pack survives, you know? So what I need you to do is I need you to take that hate and I need you to put it towards the people that actually want to hurt us, you know, that actually mean us danger, you know, because I need your sister. And, well, you need your sister, and your sister needs you. And God's help it, I need both of you, you know? And Arya starts feeling some kind of way, like hearing like her dad needs her and stuff. And he's like, so we have to stick together and be the pack, you know, like same with Septa trying to help you and stuff. There's other people trying to hurt us, and that's where we have to play. And you know, it's not Winterfell anymore. This willful stuff and running around, you know, screaming and everything, like that could really get us hurt. I'm gonna need you to just grow up a little bit, you know. And Arya actually takes it pretty well, you know. She's like I can try for you, Dad, you know, like I could be strong. I'll be as strong as Rob, you know. And like he feels like he kind of got through to her a little bit, so he's just like, you know. And she thinks it might be a trick, you know, so she doesn't necessarily grab for like her sword right away. And he's like, go on, take it, you know. And she like kind of grabs it over, and she's like, really? Like, for true? Like, I can keep it? And you know, he's like, look, if I try to take it away, you're just gonna have like a morning star under your pillow next week. You know what I mean? And he's like, but whatever you do, no matter how bad an argument gets, I don't want to hear about you stabbing your sister. All right? And she's like, I won't, I promise, you know? And then it kind of, you know, walks out. And true to form, Arya's, I guess she took it in stride and stuff, because the very next morning they're at breakfast. She walks up to Septa and she's like, hey, Septa, I wanted to apologize for inconveniencing you and running out, you know. And like, she just honest to God apologizes. Septa's like not believing her. And then she sees Ned, you know, kind of in the background, and Ned's like, you know, like, she means it. And Septa, you know, accepts her apology. And it kind of goes like that. Like, there's no incidents for about 3 days. And then Van Poole walks in, you know, like, walks up to her, and he's like, hey, you got to go to this small hall, you know, like your dad wants you to. And she's like, what? You know? And she walks into the small hall, and the small hall, and you know, has all the tables and the benches pushed to the side, like they're completely open. And there's this bald dude who has a big nose, who might be my favorite guy in this book so far, and his name is Syrio Forel, right? And he has 2 little wooden swords, you know, with like pommel guards and stuff in the style of Bravos. And Syrio is basically just like, because he talks with the Bravos accent and stuff, and he has a very peculiar way of making words, which is great. But he's like, you were late, you know, like, you were late today, you will be here mid-afternoon tomorrow, boy. You know? And he keeps calling Arya boy, which is kind of funny, right? And he's like, I am your dancing instructor. And he throws her one of the, you know, like wooden practice swords, and she just misses it. She's like, you know? And he's like, tomorrow you will catch that boy. You know? And then he's like, okay, make a stance. And she's like, and he's like, no, this isn't a great sword. Okay, you gotta pick a hand. We fight one-handed, you know? And she's like, and he's like, ooh, lefty. Good. Everything will be reversed and stuff. And before you get on me for like the slightly Spanish accent, I'm white Hispanic. Okay, so just, I could come up here in a sombrero, it's fine. But, you know, he's like, it's good. Everything's reversed. You know, it makes awkward to fight you. So you're good. And he's like, okay, now your stance. And she's like, And he's like, no, you gotta turn, you gotta get behind the blade, right? And then he's like, see, this is good. You're as skinny as a spear pole. You're a tiny target. It's good. And he just keeps going through, like, and he's like, okay, now your grip's all wrong. And he's like, you got a grip like this. And she's like, what if I drop it? And he's like, no. The sword is part of your arm. Can you drop part of your arm? No, I don't think so, boy. And he's like, look. Serial Farrell for 9 years was the first sword of the Sea Lord of Bravos. So you listen to him, boy. And he's sitting there, and and like apparently Ned got her the best Bravo sword teacher ever. Like, yeah, he was the first sword for the Sea Lord. So Ned is highly effective, I guess. Maybe that's why it was 3 days, because he was getting the absolute best guy on the planet to teach her. But then finally she's like, I'm a girl. You know what I mean? Because he keeps calling her boy. And he's like, boy, girl, it don't matter. You're a sword. Which also just makes Sirio one of the best characters ever, as far as I'm concerned. And he's like, no, we're not gonna learn like the iron dance where like they get the big smashy choppy and stuff. No, we're going to learn the water dance of Bravos. Okay, so we're gonna be quick, we're gonna be sudden, because men are mostly made of water. So if you put a hole in a man, the water runs out and then he dies. Right? And I'm like, yes, all right, I love this guy. And also, whenever she does something wrong, he clicks his teeth. He's just like, this is the wrong, but okay. And then he's like, okay, so now you are going to strike Serial Farrell, right? And she tries for 4 hours to hit this guy, and she just can't. Like, no matter what she does, she's super tired. The swords are extra heavy. He explains that they put lead in the wooden, hollow of the swords, so they're extra heavy to make her build up her strength. And so it's like Goku, she's training with weights on. and she can't even connect with this guy, for 4 hours. And then it just says and then the hard work began tomorrow. But that's where it kind of faded out, right? So I guess, Jane Poole, Sansa and stuff, they're still being kind of crappy. Arya's feeling a little better because her dad embraced her wild side a little bit and started supporting it, because she started, acting a little more grown and being a little less wild. See, part of it is I think he wanted to train her with the sword because he knew she was going to have it anyway. So he's trying to teach her responsibility and how to actually use it properly, because otherwise she's just going to be swinging it wildly. And on top of that, Ned is obviously the position is just wearing him out. He's getting sad and tired, and all the conspiracies and everything are dragging him a little low, which is understandable. And Arya's trying her best to be a good daughter to her dad, after that talk. And now she's slowly being trained to be a badass by Serial Farrell, who is worthy of his own book so far. All right. So I am Tory Torrential. This is Tory Survives Game of Thrones. We just finished chapter 22, Arya 2. And you were hopefully slightly amused. I don't know, something, And I love you.
Thanks for watching my show. Like and subscribe.